It wasn't like what you see in the movies, not at all. There wasn't this one big moment where everything fell apart in some dramatic way. No, it started off small, just little things you try to ignore at first, because you don't want to come off as paranoid. But damn, those little things really add up. And before you know it, the woman you married starts feeling like a total stranger living in your house. That's exactly how it all started with Sophia. I remember it clearly. She was getting ready for a work trip, and that's when I first felt the shift. There she was, standing in front of the bed, tossing clothes into her suitcase like she was running late for a flight. Her back was to me the whole time. At first, I didn't think much of it. She traveled a lot for work. But this time felt different. I couldn't ignore the outfits. Short dresses, tight tops, clothes that made her look amazing, no doubt about it. But they weren't things she'd ever worn for these trips before. Then there was the perfume. The one I bought her last year for our anniversary. It cost a pretty penny. She only ever wore it on special occasions, usually when we were together. I couldn't help but ask, "You really need all that for a work trip?" I tried to sound casual, but she didn't even glance at me. "Just some dinners with clients. You know how it is," she said. Except I didn't know. Not like this. Something felt off. What kind of client dinner needs lingerie and perfume that practically screams, "I'm ready to go"? And then there was the necklace, the one I gave her on our last anniversary. A simple gold chain with a tiny heart pendant. She slipped it into the suitcase like it was an afterthought. Like she had to take it, but really didn't want to. That hit me harder than I expected. It felt more like a check-the-box gesture than anything that held meaning. "Need any help?" I asked, hoping she'd look at me, but she didn't. "No, I've got it," she said, zipping up the suitcase and walking out of the room before I could say anything else. Our relationship had already been rocky in the weeks leading up to this. That trip felt like another nail in the coffin. We fought over stupid stuff. Whether I was pulling my weight around the house, why she seemed distracted all the time, whether I'd forgotten to pick up the dry cleaning. You know, the usual couple things on the surface. But underneath it all, it felt like we were crumbling, piece by piece. It wasn't just the fights, though. Sophia was pulling away from me in ways I couldn't ignore. She started coming home later than usual, always with the same excuse. "Work's been crazy." And when she did come home, she'd collapse on the couch, phone in hand, barely even acknowledging me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd mumble some half-answer, like I was just some coworker, not her husband. The worst part? The intimacy. Or rather, the lack of it. It wasn't just that we weren't being intimate. It was the way she avoided me, dodging kisses, brushing off hugs. Whenever I tried to get close, she'd stiffen or say she was tired. One night, after a nice dinner, I tried to be affectionate, and she gave me this look, half annoyed, half pitying, and said, "James, not now, okay? I have an early day tomorrow." I stood there, feeling like the biggest idiot. It was like asking someone for a dance and getting rejected in front of a whole crowd. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when everything had gone so wrong. I kept thinking back to when we first met, how just seeing her would light me up inside. We used to laugh a lot, touch each other all the time, like we couldn't get enough of each other. But now, it felt like I was living with a stranger. A few nights later, I met Ethan at the bar. We'd been friends since college, and he was the kind of guy you could talk to about anything without feeling judged. We were playing pool, knocking back whiskey, and I figured it was time to unload some of this weight on him. "She's been acting weird, man," I said, lining up a shot. Distant. Not the usual busy kind of distant. I mean really distant. Ethan chalked his cue stick and gave me a look. "Rough patches happen, dude. Maybe she's just stressed with work." "Yeah, but she changed her phone password," I added, sinking the 8-ball. That made him pause. "She tell you why?" "No," I said. He didn't say anything for a moment, just took a long drink. "Look, marriages go through stuff. I'm not saying anything's going on, but that's not exactly a good sign, man." And that's the thing about Ethan. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions. If even he was hesitating, I knew I wasn't imagining things. When I got home that night, Sophia was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay there next to her, staring at the curve of her back, the way her hair spread across the pillow. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to feel some connection, but the distance between us felt like it was measured in miles. The next morning, she left early for her trip, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek before she walked out the door. It wasn't the kind of kiss you give your husband. It felt more like the kind you give a relative at Thanksgiving. I watched her walk away, and something inside me knew. When she came back, things wouldn't be the same. Not that they were great before, but this felt different. All day, I kept going over everything in my head, looking for signs I'd missed. The times she'd cancel plans last minute. The nights she wouldn't answer her phone, telling me she was too tired. It's easy to brush that kind of stuff off when you trust someone, but once doubt starts creeping in, it's hard to ignore. I kept telling myself I'd confront her when she came back, but deep down, I already knew. Something was broken, and there was no fixing it. It hit me by accident, like a punch you don't see coming. One morning, I grabbed our shared tablet. Same as always, just planning to skim the news with my coffee. I wasn't looking for anything suspicious. It didn't even cross my mind. But then, the screen lit up, and I noticed something strange. The tablet had synced with Sophia's phone. Her messages, photos, and emails were all right there in plain view. At first, I didn't mean to snoop, I swear. But then my eyes caught a notification for a hotel bill. My stomach flipped as I opened the email. It wasn't just any bill. This one showed a dinner for two, complete with champagne, dessert, and fancy cocktails. I felt my hands start to tremble. I kept scrolling down, my eyes landing on the name of the hotel, a posh, five-star place downtown. And then I saw it, attached to the receipt, a note that made my stomach drop. Thank you for choosing us for your romantic getaway. A romantic getaway? What the hell? I wish I could say I just tossed the tablet aside and walked out, but I couldn't. I couldn't tear my eyes away. My fingers hovered over the synced photo gallery. When I opened it, my whole world tilted. There they were, pictures of Sophia in lingerie I had never seen before, striking sexy poses that I knew weren't meant for me. Immediately, I could tell those photos weren't something she'd want me to see. My chest tightened, like I was suffocating. I couldn't stop myself from scrolling further, hoping there'd be some kind of explanation, something that could make sense of what I was seeing. But the more I swiped, the worse it got. The way she posed, the way she looked, it wasn't just casual fun. It was for someone else. Someone who wasn't me. I called her right away. No answer. I dialed again. Straight to voicemail. I must have called a dozen times, pacing around the kitchen, feeling like a trapped animal. When she finally responded, all she wrote was, busy with work. Can't talk right now. That was it. No apology for ignoring my calls. No explanation. No effort to make things right. Just more bullshit. I sat down at the table, the tablet still open, trying to keep my composure. But the anger started bubbling up inside me, thick and heavy, like it might explode. I went back to the pictures, scrolling through them again, hoping maybe seeing them over and over would make them sting less. But it didn't. It made me feel worse. The next thing I did was check the messages. I don't even know why I bothered. Maybe I thought seeing everything laid out would somehow make it easier to understand. But instead, it was like a knife in my gut with every message. One name kept popping up, Lucas. Some guy I didn't recognize. Someone who had never been mentioned in any of our conversations. The messages weren't long, but they were enough to crush any hope I had left. Playful, flirtatious texts, inside jokes, plans for drinks, late nights, and hotel rooms. And then the message that shattered it all. Can't wait to see you again. Same room as last time. I sat there, staring at the screen, my head spinning, my heart pounding. That was it. My worst fear confirmed. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to see him again. I thought I'd feel rage, but all I felt in that moment was cold, empty numbness. Like I had known this was coming, and now the rest of me had just caught up. I stayed there for what felt like forever, the silence of the kitchen pressing in on me. I was holding the tablet, fighting back tears that were threatening to break through. I didn't cry often. Hell, I couldn't even remember the last time. But this was different. This wasn't just betrayal. This was the death of everything I thought we had. All those kisses, all those memories, all the promises we made. They were all just lies. I kept staring at the texts with Lucas, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Was it just him? Were there others? When had she stopped loving me? If she ever loved me at all? The hardest part was realizing she hadn't even given me a chance to try to fix things. She'd already checked out, found someone else, left me in the dark. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Sophia. We'll talk when I get back, okay? Don't stress. Don't stress? After everything I just uncovered? I almost laughed at how ridiculous that sounded. Don't stress? She didn't even try to deny it. No explanation. No panic. No remorse. Just a lazy text telling me not to worry, like I was some idiot who would just sit here and wait for her to come back after what I just learned. I set the tablet down. My hands were shaking, my anger bubbling up like I'd never felt before. Every inch of me wanted to throw the damn thing against the wall, to scream, to break something. But I didn't. I just sat there, my heart racing, trying to accept the fact that the woman I'd built my life around, the one I thought I knew better than anyone else, had been lying to me the whole time. Eventually, I stood up and started pacing around, trying to figure out what the hell to do. Do I call her now? Confront her? Or do I wait until she gets back and see her face when I lay it all out? One thing was clear. There was no going back from this. Whatever we had was gone. The second she sent those pictures, it was over. The second she chose someone else over the life we had together. What scared me the most wasn't losing her. It was realizing I might never have really known her at all. The rest of the day was a blur. I replayed every moment we'd shared, trying to find the cracks I missed. The late nights, the canceled plans, the growing distance between us. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase, that we'd work through it. But now I knew better. There was no fixing this. It never was going to be fixed. I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch, and stared at the tablet again. The messages from Lucas were still open, taunting me, daring me to do something about it. My fists clenched as I thought about that smug jerk, knowing he'd been with my wife, while I sat at home like a fool. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover. Not from booze, but from the emotional wreckage I'd been drowning in all night. My eyes burned, my chest felt tight, and every breath was a struggle. I couldn't keep this in anymore, so I called Ethan. If there was anyone who would give it to me straight, it was him. We agreed to meet at the bar where we always hung out. I threw on whatever clothes I found, not caring how I looked. When I got there, Ethan was already waiting at a corner table, nursing a beer. His expression shifted the second he saw me. Concern mixed with curiosity, like he could sense something major had happened. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the tablet toward him, watching as his eyes moved over the screen. "Jesus, man," he muttered, swiping through the photos and reading the messages. This is bad." He shook his head, clearly unsettled. Ethan wasn't the type to get easily rattled, but I could see the disbelief written across his face. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything pressing in. What the hell do I do now, Ethan? Just walk away? Let her get off scot-free? He sighed deeply, setting the tablet down and locking eyes with me. "You've got two choices, James. First, you can walk away, get a lawyer, cut your losses, and move on. Yeah, it'll hurt like hell, but at least you'll keep your dignity." I shook my head, frustration flaring up. That's not enough. Not after what she's done. Ethan gave me a knowing look, like he understood exactly what I was feeling. Then option 2, make her feel the pain. Hit her where it hurts. Make her feel what you're feeling right now. I stared at him, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person, let karma handle it, and walk away. But the other part of me, the part that had spent the last few hours staring at those photos, going over the lies in my head, wanted revenge. I wasn't proud of that side of me, but it was there, simmering just beneath the surface. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "I want her to feel it," I said quietly. "I want her to experience everything I'm feeling right now." Ethan nodded, almost like he'd expected that answer. "Then you know what you've got to do." The plan started forming in my head as I made my way home. Something dark, calculated. Confronting her? Too easy. No, I wanted her to feel the betrayal, the gut-wrenching hurt. And I knew just who I could use to make that happen. Chloe Anderson. Chloe had been Sophia's friend for years, though they'd grown distant lately. Chloe had always flirted with me, harmless little things when Sophia wasn't around. Now those moments felt like an opportunity. I didn't need to convince myself that Chloe would help. I knew she would. She'd always wanted me, and I was ready to give her a taste of it, just for one night. I pulled up her number from my contacts and shot her a message. Hey Chloe, been thinking about you. Want to grab dinner sometime? It didn't take long for her to reply. I thought you'd never ask. When? I couldn't help but smirk, even though it felt more bitter than anything. Tomorrow night. My place. The reply was practically instant. I'm in. Can't wait. With that, everything was set into motion. There was no turning back now. The next day, I spent hours preparing the house. I bought dozens of candles, flowers, everything to make it look like something out of a cheesy romantic movie. I set the table with our best dishes, poured some wine, and dimmed the lights just enough to create a warm, intimate vibe. To anyone else, it would look like I was preparing for a romantic evening, like I was trying to win my wife back. But inside, I was setting up the stage for her worst nightmare. I went upstairs to the bedroom to double-check everything. The bed was made, the sheets fresh, and the room smelled like lavender, the way Sophia liked it. I placed 2 wine glasses on the nightstand for the effect and turned the lights down low. It was all part of the act, a perfect illusion. By the time I was done, the house looked flawless. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The house felt like a stage, and I was the one pulling the strings. I had control again. For the first time since I discovered those messages, I felt like I was in charge. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Here I was, using something as sacred as romance, a thing that was supposed to be built on trust and love, as a weapon. I didn't just want to hurt Sophia. I wanted to break her, like she had broken me. Tomorrow night, Chloe would come over, and everything would fall into place. Sophia wouldn't see it coming, and when she did, it would be too late. That night, Sophia came home late, dragging her suitcase behind her. I heard the familiar jingle of keys as she fumbled with the door, and when she stepped inside, she seemed at ease. Tired, sure, but it wasn't the exhaustion from a long day of work. No, this was the tiredness of someone who'd been having a little too much fun. Her eyes had that glazed-over look, her hair a little messy, and she moved with that relaxed ease, like she'd had the kind of night that didn't involve work at all. If I didn't know better, I might have bought it. She might have just been happy to be home, but I knew better. Hey, babe, I said, meeting her at the door with a warm smile, a glass of wine in hand. You look like you could use this. She blinked, clearly caught off guard by my sudden friendliness. She wasn't expecting this, not after the tension that had been between us before she left. But I saw it in her eyes, relief, that flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I didn't know. Maybe her secret was still safe. Thanks, she said, taking the wine and sipping it slowly. I missed you. I smiled, though it made my stomach churn. I bet you did, I thought, but I didn't let the bitterness show. I missed you too, I said softly, the lie slipping off my tongue so easily it felt like second nature. She smiled back, and for a moment, it almost felt like things were back to normal. Almost. I could see her relaxing, the tension easing from her shoulders as she kicked off her shoes and set her suitcase by the door. Any guilt she might have been feeling was quickly fading, replaced by a sense of relief, like she'd somehow escaped the consequences. Dinner's ready, I said, pointing toward the dining room. I thought we could have a little date night. Just the two of us. She looked genuinely moved by that, which only made me angrier. How could she so easily slip back into her role as the loving wife after everything? After she had spent so many nights elsewhere? But I kept it together. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about her, making sure she felt every ounce of the betrayal I had been carrying. At the table, I poured more wine and served the meal I'd cooked earlier. I kept the conversation light, asking about her trip and pretending to care about her answers. She went on about meetings and presentations, filling in the blanks like a practice liar. I nodded, pretending to be interested, Like everything she said made perfect sense. So, how were the client dinners? I asked, swirling the wine in my glass. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough for me to catch it. They were good. Productive, she replied quickly. I gave her a warm smile. Good. I'm glad. She studied me for a second, like she was trying to figure out what had changed. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but any doubts were quickly buried under the image I'd carefully built. By the time we finished dinner, she was completely relaxed, even leaning across the table to brush my hand like everything was back to normal. It was almost laughable how easy it was to lull her into thinking everything was fine. She thought she was safe. She thought things were okay again. But the night was just beginning. After we finished eating, I stood up and took her hand. Come on, I said. Let's go upstairs. She looked pleasantly surprised. You sure? You're not tired? Not at all, I replied, my tone light and casual. I've been waiting for this. She followed me upstairs, her guard completely down. I could feel the shift in the air as we climbed the stairs, her hand warm in mine. In her mind, this was the start of some kind of reconciliation, a fresh start. I could almost hear her thinking, maybe we can fix this. When we reached the bedroom door, I let her go ahead. After you, I said, casually leaning against the doorframe. Sophia pushed the door open and froze. There, in the middle of our bed, was Chloe. She was in nothing but a silk robe, stretched out comfortably, wearing that smug, knowing smile. Hey, Sophia, Chloe said, her voice dripping with amusement. Miss me? I watched the color drain from Sophia's face as the realization hit her. It was almost poetic, the way her expression shifted, confusion, then shock, and finally, horror. What the? Sophia stammered, her eyes darting between me and Chloe. What the hell is this? I crossed my arms, enjoying this far more than I probably should. Now you know how it feels, I said calmly, my voice steady. She just stared at me, her face pale, mouth opening and closing as if she was trying to speak but couldn't. James, what the hell is going on? I gave her a cold smile. What's the matter, Sophia? I thought you liked surprises. Chloe chuckled softly, shifting on the bed, clearly enjoying the chaos she'd helped create. You're fucking insane, Sophia spat, her voice trembling with anger and disbelief. You brought her into our bed? Into your bed? I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I thought this bed lost its meaning the moment you decided to share yourself with Lucas. For a brief second, I saw real fear in Sophia's eyes. She knew. She knew I had found out everything. I can explain, she started, her voice shaky, but I raised my hand to stop her. Don't, I said flatly. I've heard enough lies. Sophia glanced between me and Chloe, her hands trembling. James, please, this isn't. Save it, I interrupted, my tone sharp. This is exactly what it looks like. Now you get to understand what it feels like to be betrayed. Chloe slowly stood up, stretching like she had all the time in the world, clearly in no rush to leave. Well, this was fun, she said with a smirk, grabbing her clothes from the floor. Thanks for the invite. I didn't say anything as she walked past Sophia, brushing her shoulder on the way out. The look on Sophia's face was priceless, pure devastation mixed with disbelief. When Chloe left, Sophia turned on me, her anger finally erupting. You bastard, she hissed. How could you do this to me? I tilted my head and gave her the same look she had often given me. How could I? How could you? She stood there, breathing heavily, her fists clenched, tears filling her eyes. But there was no sympathy left in me. Not anymore. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her fall apart under the weight of everything she'd done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Sophia's face twisted in rage, and the silence between us shattered like glass. She launched into a tirade, her voice raw and sharp, cutting through the room. You fucking asshole, she screamed, her fists clenched tight. How dare you bring that woman into our bed? How dare you? I stood there, calm as ever, arms crossed, watching her unravel. It was surreal, really, like I had pulled the mask off her face and finally revealed the person underneath. The rage, the panic, the betrayal were all there for me to see. The irony of it almost made me laugh. "You did this to me?" she shouted, her voice cracking, desperate to turn the tables. "After everything, you do this?" I leaned against the wall, giving her the coldest look I could manage. "Now you know how it feels," I said steadily. It hit her like a brick. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. I saw it then, the moment it hit her. The weight of what she had done was staring her right in the face. She took a step back, like I had physically struck her. Her whole body trembled, and her face drained of color. "You don't understand, James," she stammered, her voice dropping from anger to something almost pleading. "It wasn't what you think. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just one stupid, drunken night. A mistake." She was grasping at anything she thought might save her now, throwing out excuses like they might somehow make a difference. The words came in a frantic, desperate rush, and they all felt like lies. "I didn't want to hurt you," she continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was never supposed to be serious. I was just drunk and not thinking straight. I didn't even know what I was doing." I didn't blink. I just watched her, letting her excuses float by like static, background noise I had no interest in. She sounded like a teenager trying to get out of trouble, not a woman trying to explain away a betrayal that had shattered everything we'd built. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice heavy with disbelief. "So what? Lucas just accidentally ended up in your bed?" Her face flushed, and she turned away, unable to face me. "I swear, James," she whispered, tears streaming down her face now. "It didn't mean anything. I was just confused, lonely. We were in such a bad place and I—" "Stop." I cut her off, my voice as cold as ice. "Just stop." She looked at me, her eyes wide, like she was still hoping that maybe I would change my mind. But I didn't feel pity, not even a little bit. Before she could say another word, Chloe stirred from the bed, stretching slowly, completely unfazed by the scene unfolding. "Well, that was entertaining," she said with a smirk, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Sophia turned to her, her gaze sharp with venom. "Get the hell out of my house." Chloe took her sweet time getting dressed, savoring the moment like it was a game. She tied her robe loosely around her waist and stood up, moving without any rush at all. "Relax, Sophia," Chloe said, flashing a smug grin. "I was just doing what you couldn't, keeping your husband company." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching as this played out exactly the way I had planned. Chloe gave me a wink before she walked toward the door. As she passed Sophia, she leaned in, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Guess what, Sophia? He's not even that great of a husband." Sophia stood frozen, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might break her teeth. But she didn't say anything, not to Chloe, not to me. She just stood there, completely broken, in a way that felt all too familiar to me. Chloe strolled toward the door, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She glanced back over her shoulder one last time, giving me a satisfied smile. "Thanks for the invite, James," she said with a wink. I nodded in response, and with that, she was gone, leaving Sophia and me alone in the wreckage. As soon as the door shut behind her, Sophia turned back to me, her face a twisted mess of rage, shame, and disbelief. Her breath caught, and I could see the cracks spreading wider in her carefully built facade. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered, her voice hollow, like the betrayal had sucked the life out of her. I let the silence sit between us, thick and suffocating, before finally answering. How could I not? The next morning, after everything had fallen apart, I woke up before the sun. The bed felt colder than it ever had. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about what needed to happen next. There was no going back now. Whatever was left between Sophia and me was beyond repair, and I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. I got out of bed carefully, making sure not to wake her, and headed downstairs. The house felt heavy, like the calm after a storm. I saw her suitcase where she had left it by the door, and I took it to the kitchen. I opened it and began packing her clothes, methodically, without emotion. I wasn't angry anymore. The fury from last night had burned itself out, leaving behind only a strange clarity. I was done. By the time the sun began to rise, her suitcase was packed and waiting by the door. I made a pot of coffee and poured myself a mug, savoring the quiet for a moment. Then I sat at the table and waited. It wasn't long before I heard her footsteps on the stairs, soft and hesitant. She probably thought we'd talk it through, that maybe I'd still be furious, but if she could say the right thing, I might stay. I could almost picture the speech she had rehearsed in her head all night. She came into the room slowly, eyes red from crying. "James," she started, her voice fragile, like it might crack at any moment. I didn't let her finish. "Your suitcase is by the door," I said evenly, pointing toward it. "I've already packed your things." She blinked, clearly confused, unable to process what was happening. What are you saying?" "I filed for divorce this morning," I said flatly. "It's over, Sophia." Her face crumpled, like my words hit her with the force of a punch. "No, James, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can work through it." I shook my head slowly. "No, we can't. It's too late." She rushed toward me, hands grabbing at my arms, tears falling freely now. "Please, James. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I'll do anything to make it right. Just don't leave me." Her words were desperate, promises that meant nothing now. I looked down at her, seeing her for what she was now. No longer the woman I once loved, but a stranger who had destroyed everything. "It's too late," I repeated, my voice cold and firm. She sobbed harder, clinging to me like I was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. But I didn't give in. There was no forgiveness left, no second chances, no going back. I gently pulled her hands off me and took a step back. "You need to leave." Her face twisted in agony, but she knew there was nothing left to say. She turned toward the door, dragging her suitcase behind her with trembling hands. For a brief moment, she paused, like she was waiting for me to call her back, to offer her one last chance to make things right. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching her open the door and step into the morning light. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed was deafening, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like relief, like I could finally breathe again after holding my breath for far too long. I poured myself another cup of coffee and took it out to the terrace, the cool morning breeze brushing against my skin. The sky was painted with soft pinks and oranges as the sun began to rise, spilling light over the horizon. I sat down in my usual spot, cradling the warm mug between my hands, and watched the world slowly come to life. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt at peace. There was still pain, still the sting of betrayal lingering in the back of my mind, but it didn't consume me anymore. I knew it would take time to heal, but I was finally free. No more lies. No more games. No more pretending. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, and that was enough. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the moment, and let the past slip away with the rising sun. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, without fear or regret. And this time, I would do it alone.